All right, so joined by Cathie LeFort, the daughter of Mr. Dressup himself, Ernie Coombs. Here, we're talking about the documentary that is officially out. It's streaming now on
Yeah.
Amazon Prime. I have watched it already. The morning it came out, I made a point to get up early before the show to watch it, and it's fantastic. I will say more than a few tears are shed, throughout it as a viewer for multiple reasons. And I just got to say, from your standpoint, it must be a wild ride seeing this finally come to fruition, especially after it won the Toronto International Film Festival People's Choice Award. Like it was the winner there. So how does it feel for you having this finally out now? People get to see it and probably flood you with a million messages about it.
Well, it is really exciting. I think it officially launched last night, and I started getting pings from some friends through social media. Very, very excited to hear what people's experience is of watching it. I've had the opportunity to see it on the big screen with an audience, and that's pretty incredible, let me tell you. I think we should have a little disclaimer saying, please use tissues or bring tissues. That's part of it.
Yeah.
It's I think it's a um, very nostalgic journey, and it will be for a lot of people who are watching.
Well, and there were so many big names that made appearances. Whether I don't know if any of the footage from some of them was done specifically for this, or if it was previous footage from interviews of celebrities talking about Ernie, about your dad. But a lot of really big names saying some really amazing things. I'm wondering if any one of those stood out. Is there anything that was said by somebody about him that kind of means the most to you, or that you always think, that's what resonated when you watched it back the first time?
There were a couple of experiences. First of all, Michael J. Fox, he actually thanked Dad in his acceptance speech when he received the Order of Canada. And that was so humbling to know that Dad had such an impact on him. And then the second experience that comes to mind was, for me, Bare Naked Ladies. That was, they're
Yeah,
my era of music. And when I walked into the documentary screening, they were there, and I was a little starstruck. And they came over and they were like, "Hey, so great to meet you," and telling me about their experience. They went to see Dad's show one time in North Bay when they were on tour in North Bay, and so was Dad. And Dad went to their show in the evening, and they went to his afternoon performance, which I
wow.
thought was awesome, just awesome. But it just, there's such a cross section of Canadian celebrities that kind of is a bit of a pulse of how he touched all Canadians. I mean, those folks are in on television and in the media, so we're all familiar with them. But I think they're just kind of like a little bit of a microcosm of maybe the impact that he had on all Canadians.
Well, I think the documentary, especially, I don't want to give anything away because obviously we want people to watch it, but near the end where it kind of shows when he was talking, and he kind of did his rounds after retiring, and doing those talks with the older kids that would have been watched him 15, 20 years before that, and seeing that interaction is wonderful. I don't want to give anything away, but it's definitely something to watch on there. What did it mean when this idea came up for you and for your whole family? What did it mean for this documentary to be made in the first place?
Well, my brother and I have always been extremely protective of my dad's legacy. And, when Rob approached us, we were a little bit trepidatious at first. We sat down, we did a Zoom call, had a great discussion with him. And it wasn't a business meeting per se, it was a kind of a get to know you call. And by the time we had finished that, we knew Rob was the right person. If anybody was going to make a film about Dad and his legacy and his life, it was going to be Rob. And I'm just absolutely so proud and amazed at the piece of work in its totality, because there was a lot that went into it. And it's just really, really, there's so many things that will be, I think, surprising and, to people as they're watching.
So how long ago would that initial meeting have been? Like, how long was this in the works for?
I think it was 2019.
Wow.
And then things kind of got a little bit put on the back burner, and the kind of that happened throughout the world.
Yeah.
But then I think the momentum really, really picked up We got some folks involved with Marvel Media, Hawkeye Pictures, all part of it. And then, of course, Amazon Prime came on board, and things just took off like a rocket at that point.
Yeah.
And yeah, all I can just keep, and I know I keep saying it, but I'm just so proud of what the end product is like, and I'm so excited for people to see it.
Well, it does. I mean, it obviously shows everything about how your dad affected everybody, right? And it really gets that across. And this was touched on very briefly, I noticed in the documentary, about how your dad was off screen, right? Like, was he the same? You hear all the stories that he was wonderful and all, but home life sometimes is a little different. So how was he when he walked through the door? Was he Mr. Dressup? Was he joking all the time, that same kind of guy, or was there a little bit of a switch that he had to turn on when TV times came around?
I think you will find, and you'll hear from most people, that there was no switch. He didn't come home and kick off his Mr. Dressup shoes. He was that guy. When I was growing up, he was just Cathie's dad or Chris's dad. And with my kids, he was Grampy to them. Their kids got to know him, and their friends got to know him. And he was just Liam's Grampy or Caitlin's Grampy. He was very much that guy, very witty, very funny, often silly. The one thing that I take away from that is, that ability to be silly with my kids, my grandkids, be present, just take the time, and he was indeed that guy. He definitely was.
Yeah. Along with that, I think it was your brother in the documentary mentioned sometimes it wasn't easy growing up with Mr. Dressup, and there was a little bit of teasing at one point. So overall, though, as a whole, as a kid, was it cool having Mr. Dressup as a dad, or a little embarrassing having Mr. Dressup as a dad?
I know Chris, my brother, talked about it being embarrassing for him, and perhaps his experience was a little bit different, getting the ribbing from the guys and that kind of thing. I didn't find it difficult at all. I had a really tight group of friends growing up, and he was just, I think they called him Mr. Coombs at that time, a little more formal,
Right.
Cathie's dad. But they all have great memories of just, being. There's one scene in the documentary you will actually see that was in my parents' kitchen. 3 or 4 people have come up to me since seeing the documentary and said, I remember that kitchen counter. I remember all those conversations, all those
Right.
cups of coffee, maybe a glass of wine later on in life over that kitchen counter,
Wow.
and having the best conversations with your parents. So yeah, he really was that guy.
That's cool. So I know, again, it showed, and he talked about some of the grandkids getting to go through the tickle trunk and do the costumes that were, too big for them, obviously. Was that a thing when you were a kid, or was it your kids that just got to benefit from that?
I think we may have gotten into the tickle trunk once or twice as kids, and maybe more teenagers when we were, causing more mischief.
Right.
But we definitely did that, and then yeah, grandkids for sure. Putting on plays was a big thing
It was probably
in the Coombs household,
it was probably great for Halloween costumes. You never had to go buy anything. It was just, smorgasbord of it.
and still is, might I add. I have dad's costumes here at my home. And I was a witch a couple of years ago when I was taking my granddaughter trick-or-treating, and I wore the wizard's robe for part
Nice.
of my costume. So I still have all
That's
those
cool.
resources.
Yeah. So what else? I mean, I was going to ask about that. So the tickle trunk or the costume and stuff you have, where's the trunk itself? And are there any other set pieces or any of the puppets that you guys were able to hang on to?
So in terms of the tickle trunk, there have been several iterations of it. The actual real original touring tickle trunk that my dad had is living in the UK with my brother. He's got it there. And then there are other iterations of it. There's one right now that was made for the documentary specifically, and you'll see that in various locations in Toronto. It was at a recent screening. It was at the TIFF screenings. And I think it's been on CBC on some of their television programs recently. Puppets all belong to the puppeteers. So Casey and Finnegan, they belong to Judith Lawrence, and they are living with her currently, still, doing very well. Casey hasn't aged a bit. And And then there are a whole ensemble of other puppets that were the second generation, kind of after Casey and Finnegan, went off to, well, Judith retired and Casey and Finnegan went off to school, presumably.
Right.
So I think that all of those puppets are probably, still doing well, and along with them.
Yeah, that the second generation is the ones that I'm a little more familiar with, Chester and all of them. So that those are the ones that I remember most as a kid. So it's kind of, I knew, the originals probably went with the puppeteer, but I wasn't sure if that was the case for all of them. So that's kind of cool. Um, when you look at that era of TV for kids back then, whether it was Friendly Giant, Mr. Dressup, Mr. Rogers, it was a very different type of children's programming than what there is today. And of course, YouTube and social media has changed it quite drastically. But when you look at the stuff that's out there today, whether it's the kids animated stuff, the Cocomelons, or the characters like a Blippi or things like that, what do you think of it now compared to back then? Do you notice similarities? Is it wildly different to you? I'm curious your take on today's kids entertainment, if you're familiar with much of it.
I was just going to say, I don't have that much familiarity kind of on the day to day. I am familiar with Cocomelon. Blue's Clues is another one that I've watched with my grandkids, which I think, is very much kind of in that same vein as Dad's show. Incidentally, directed by Alison McCourt, who used to work with Dad on the show. So perhaps there's a little bit of that influence there.
Yeah.
Something that I think is very true is that preschoolers really haven't changed. A 3-year-old or a 4-year-old, they live in a very kind of, or they relate to the world kind of in an insular way. They learn through play, they learn through their imagination, and that really hasn't changed. And I think some of the inputs are different. I know many 3 or 4-year-olds who know how to use an iPhone,
Yeah.
but I still think that kind of simple approach, simple materials, just making things out of nothing. Right now, I have a cardboard box made into a cave down in my basement that my granddaughter and I made. I think that still happens, and maybe all of us as adults have taken that little bit of Mr. Dressup with us, and we kind of carry that and we share it with our children. I really hope so, because I do think it's really important, especially in this really, fast-paced, fast-moving world of 10-second sound bites and that kind of thing.
Yeah, I think there's just something innately in the brains of kids at that age where they want to build forts and they want to glue things together and cut things out,
Absolutely.
draw on things. And my son's 6 right now, and he's doing these folding surprises. So you fold the paper over and you draw a picture. Then when you unfold it, it's like the mouth opens when you open it, and all sorts of things like that. And no idea where he came up with the idea to do that. Maybe he saw it on a video somewhere, but I think that's just what's in their minds, right? Is creativity.
Absolutely.
It's wonderful.
Absolutely.
2 more quick things. Did you ever get a chance, or your brother get a chance, to be in an episode, or would you ever have wanted to, or is that something you wanted to stay away from? Were you ever asked?
Neither one of us were in any of the television episodes. Me by choice, because I didn't really, I came from a family of actors, but I kind of took a different career path. My brother was an actor early on, and so he did do some kind of children's kind of teenager type television early on in his career. He did, however, one time pick up a balloon animal at one of the live shows and completely, started this whole situation where he was poking a balloon animal through the set. And Dad kind of looked over and was like, "Oh," and kind of had to ad lib. And so, I think Chris had, those aspirations back then as well.
Just to wrap it up with the documentary now out, people can go and watch it on Amazon Prime Video. What are you hoping people take away from it? I mean, we know what anybody that was around and had any, you watched one episode of Mr. Dressup, you know what Mr. Dressup was about, is the kindness, the imagination, the creativity, treating everybody equally. And it really obviously talks quite a bit about that in the documentary. But is there anything that you hope people take away from that maybe they aren't aware of, or anything like that?
Well, I really hope people just kind of reconnect with that feeling of nostalgia. That they have that experience that kind of takes them back to where they were those mornings when they would sit down to watch Mr. Dressup what that felt like. I think we can all use a little bit of that in the world today. I heard it described as a warm hug,
Mm.
and I really hope that's the experience for people when they watch it.
I think it will be. That is a good way to describe it. Is there any story that comes to mind real quick? I just thought of this now. Any story of your dad that comes to mind that you like to share when people say, "Hey, what was he like? What do you remember the most about him?" Is there any one situation, funny thing he said, a joke he told 800 times, something like that?
There were jokes he told 800 times, but I'll. I think one of the most fun things I remember is our Halloween displays at the house. He would go all out. We had a long driveway, we had a two-story home, and he would run a wire from the doorway to the bottom of the driveway and had this witch that would zoom like across the driveway and and scare the daylights out of the kids, which was not his intent. He thought it was more to be fun, but everybody was always really interested in coming to Mr. Dressup's house for Halloween, and he just loved doing those kinds of things.
Cool. That's cool. Well, I appreciate you taking the time. I hope everybody goes and finds a way to watch this. If you don't have Amazon Prime, get it. Get the free trial just to make sure you watch this, because a warm hug is a great way to describe it. I think it's fantastic. So I appreciate you taking some time to talk about it, share a little bit about your dad as well. And I hope you get inundated with a gazillion positive messages, which probably will be.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Nice to talk to you today.